All right, let's talk about a phrase you might be hearing a lot lately. No kings. It's this really powerful slogan that's popping up at protests on two different continents, but for two totally different reasons. So today, we're going to break it all down.
Yeah, democracy, not monarchy. You see signs like this at rallies, and, it captures a feeling that's been around for centuries. But it's having a major comeback in the 21st century. It's simple, it's direct, and it's a clear challenge to a certain kind of power.
So, when we see these protests in 2026, who exactly is the king they're talking about? Well, the answer? It's not as straightforward as you might think.
It's actually a two-part answer. On one side, you have a literal fight, protesting an actual king in the UK. And on the other, it's a metaphorical fight, protesting a so-called king in the United States. Okay, let's dive into this, starting with what's happening in the UK.
All right, first up, the United Kingdom. We're talking about a literal battle here against a real monarch. And challenging the monarchy there, well, it can land you in some serious legal trouble.
So one of the tools police have is this thing called breach of the peace. It's kind of tricky because it's not technically a criminal offense in England, but police can still arrest you just to prevent something from happening, like if they think you might cause a disturbance.
And then there's another one, public nuisance. This is a newer charge, and its definition of serious harm is, well, it's incredibly broad. We're talking serious annoyance or serious inconvenience. And get this, it can carry a prison sentence of up to 10 years. That's pretty intense.
So these aren't just abstract laws, right? They're being used. We've seen a bunch of high-profile arrests. There was a guy in Oxford who got arrested just for shouting who elected him at King Charles's proclamation, a woman in Edinburgh arrested for a sign, and then during the coronation, 64 people were arrested, including the CEO of the anti-monarchy group Republic. So yeah, the crackdown has been pretty swift.
And what's really interesting is that all this is happening while public support for the monarchy is actually going down. A recent poll shows that support has dropped to just 45%, and a full third of people in the UK now say they'd rather have an elected head of state. So the tension is definitely building.
Okay, so that's the literal fight in the UK. Now let's hop across the pond to the United States, where that same No Kings slogan has been picked up for a completely different kind of battle.
Over in the US, they're not protesting a literal monarch, of course. They're protesting a president. But the scale of this thing, it is absolutely staggering. We're talking an estimated 8 million people taking part in just the latest wave of protests worldwide. 8 million?
So what's driving all these people to the streets? Well, it's not just one thing. This movement is really a coalition, fueled by a whole range of grievances against the administration's policies. You've got everything from aggressive immigration enforcement to rising inflation and fuel prices, the war in Iran, rollbacks of transgender rights, and this general growing concern about authoritarianism.
So this all brings up a really important question, right? You've got millions of people on the streets, but how does a movement like this actually create change? How does it succeed? Like, is there some kind of magic number, a tipping point where a government simply can't ignore the voice of the people anymore?
Well, according to some really groundbreaking research from a Harvard professor named Erica Chenoweth, there just might be. It's called the 3.5% rule.
The idea is this: if you can get just 3.5% of the population actively involved in a protest, it's pretty much guaranteed to create serious political change. In fact, her research found that no government in history has been able to withstand a sustained challenge of that size. Think about that for a second.
So let's put this into perspective for the No Kings movement in the US. With about 8 million people turning out, it's already one of the largest protest movements in American history. Now, that 3.5% threshold for the US is around 11.5 million people, so they're not there yet, but they are getting remarkably close. It really shows you the potential power we're talking about.
But a movement isn't just a numbers game. Its real strength, its staying power, often comes from the diversity of the people who make it up, the coalition.
And we're seeing that really clearly here. For example, faith communities have been a huge part of this. They frame the protests not just as a political thing, but as a moral and spiritual duty. Just listen to this quote from Reverend Mira Solani Joyner. "When we say no kings, we say yes. Yes to life over profit, yes to people over power, yes to justice that sets the captive free." It's this beautiful way of turning a negative slogan into a powerful, positive call for justice.
And you see that same kind of conviction reflected right on the streets, on the protest signs themselves. People get really creative. You've got these historical callbacks like No Kings since 1776, which obviously has deep roots in American history.
And then you have the direct, witty, and kind of funny jabs like, "Put down the crown, clown." It's a whole mix. Now, if we look at the data, something else pops out. A pretty significant gender gap in the president's approval ratings. You can see there's a 10-point difference between men and women, and that gap helps explain why we're seeing such a massive turnout of women at these protests and why issues like reproductive and maternal health have become such a central focus for the movement.
Okay, so where does all this leave us? We've looked at two different movements, one literal, one metaphorical, on two different continents, but they're both using the exact same simple idea to challenge the way things are.
And really, when you strip it all away, it comes down to one fundamental thing: the relationship between people and power. Whether you're protesting a king or a president, that No King slogan is, at its heart, a demand for accountability from the people in charge.
And that leads us to our final big question. When people start to believe that power has become unchecked, what does history teach us happens next? Because the fight against a king, whether that king is real or just a symbol, is a story as old as civilization itself. And as these movements around the globe are showing us, it's a story that is clearly not over.